I was genuinely staggered this week to realise there are people in this country who will pay $8.50 for junk mail. I mean, seriously, most people hate junk mail. And yet there are those who are willing to go out and hand over cash for this. Oh, the fashion pages, I guess, are good for a laugh. I mean, do women really want to dress like that? And the articles, please don't tell me there are people gullible enough to read these articles and actually believe them. I guess it explains why we're in such a mess as a society though, doesn't it? When the public will actually pay money to get fake news, expensive ads, hilarious fashion and celebrity gossip, I don't know what to expect. Well, late last year, a journalist contacted myself and Debbie Robinson saying he was writing a piece for Marie Claire. He introduced himself to me as Peter Munro. I've never heard of him, and in our initial conversation I told him I was very sceptical about so-called journalists and the left-wing slant that most seem to have. I clearly expressed my concerns and let him know that the media's insistence on creating perceptions rather than reporting the truth has left not just a bad taste in my mouth, but that the public are waking up to the nonsense. He insisted he wasn't like that and asked for a 1-hour phone interview the following week. I agreed, as I've come to realise any publicity and exposure can lead to thoughtful and common sense people just discover what the truth actually is, even when the writers miss the mark. Well, once I got off the phone, I googled Peter Munro. Immediately I realised he was in the same stereotypical basket as most other so-called journalists. He didn't tell the full truth. That he wasn't really a writer for Marie Claire, but for the Sydney Morning Herald. I contacted him straight away, and instead of apologising for being misleading, he defended himself by saying he does work for the Sydney Morning Herald, but this piece was contracted to Marie Claire. Now, I'm sure he can justify the omission in his own mind, but I had just finished telling him how deceptive the media are, and he couldn't even be upfront with me about who he is. Well, the interview itself went ahead the following week for a decent amount of time. I think I offended him initially when I asked him who on earth actually reads Marie Claire. He also couldn't believe I don't watch television. He said something along the lines of, well, where do you get your news? I laughed so hard. I mean, is he admitting that's where he gets his news? After the initial chit-chat, I told him I would answer his questions, but I was not confident he would accurately represent me. I was right. This week it was brought to my attention that the article had indeed been published. Here on the cover it says, "The Trump Factor, the rise of Australia's far right." They don't even try to hide their bias. And if you go online, it's clear that this is a Hillary-loving left-wing rag that hates Trump and anything to do with mainstream conservative issues. So I guess it's not really surprising. I very reluctantly went out and handed over my hard-earned cash for this magazine and found the article on page 28. Okay? The headline says, "The women ruling right-wing Australia. If you believe Donald Trump's win and rise of the far right is an American problem, think again. Extremist groups are growing in Australia and it's women who are leading the charge," by Robert Hardy. Wait, what? By Robert Hardy? Who the hell is Robert Hardy? Well, I sent Peter Munro a text and asked him and he said it was his pen name. Well, I guess you would have to use a fake name to write fake news. I'd be too embarrassed to use my real name too to write such trash. Now what follows is a 3-page special report about these so-called extremist women. Now I can't speak for Kim Vooga or others, but I suspect they're similar to you and I. Being labelled an extremist or far right is absurd. Debbie Robinson, the president of ALA, and myself exposed the extremist attitudes and behaviours of Islam. Extreme things like child abuse in the form of child marriages, violent commands coming straight from the textbooks for terrorism, otherwise known as the Quran and Hadiths. We shine a spotlight on the countless jihadis who literally obey the extremist commands in these texts. We highlight the fact the ideology is full of extremist ideas and behaviours that result in oppression, discrimination and violence. The special report says about me in particular. Smith, who's 45, a mother of 3, believes halal certification fees help fund terrorism, despite a 2015 Senate inquiry finding no direct link. But facts don't seem to shake anyone's resolve. Oh, the delicious irony here. Peter Munro uses a fake name to write a fake story about female extremists in Australia. You want to talk about facts? Your name is Peter Munro, not Robert Hardy, and you work for the Sydney Morning Herald. You want to talk about facts, Peter? Here are some facts about halal certification. I have never said halal certification directly funds terrorism. I didn't say that to you, and I've not said that to anyone. The facts are, Peter, that halal certification does directly fund Islamic schools, mosques, and Islamic charities, usually without consumer knowledge or consent. The facts are, Peter, that AUSTRAC, the Australian Institute of Criminology, and the Australian Crime Commission all report that Islamic charities are one of the three main conduits for funding terrorism and extremist activities. The facts are, these agencies have not actually investigated the links between halal certification, Islamic charities, and extremists. Check the Parliamentary Hansard if you don't believe me, it's all there. The fact is, Peter, that the women you have written about here expose extremism and are not themselves extremists. We do not incite or condone violence. We don't practice barbaric or oppressive behaviours that are anti-women, anti-gay or anti-democracy. We highlight the way Islam does, though. The only extremism we condone is to be extremely reasonable and extremely passionate about freedom, democracy and equality. So when you say the facts don't seem to shake anyone's resolve, Peter, start with yourself. The fact is your name is Peter Munro, not Robert Hardy. The fact is you work for the dying and increasingly irrelevant Sydney Morning Herald. And for whatever reason only known to you, you write fake news under a fake name for this glorified junk mail magazine.